My name is Renee, and I'm here with Emma, and we are both wellness coordinators at Kapnick Strive. And we'd like to thank you for joining us today for today's presentation, Thriving Through Life's Peaks and Valleys. Every one of us experience times when life feels joyful, productive, and meaningful. Those are the peaks. But we also go through valleys, times of stress, uncertainty, or even grief. Thriving doesn't mean we stay at the top of the mountain all of the time. Instead, it means developing resilience and skills to navigate both peaks and valleys in a healthy and fulfilling way. The American Psychological Association defines resilience as the process of adapting well in the face of adversity, trauma, tragedy, or significant stress. This adaptation is not about avoiding pain, but about learning from it and finding ways to grow stronger. Throughout today's session, we'll explore practical strategies backed by research in psychology, neuroscience, and positive psychology that can help us thrive across life's changing landscapes. Life's ups and downs are universal. No matter your background, career, or stage of life, you will experience both triumphs and challenges. There's a quote from the TV series Mad Men that I think of on this topic, and it is, "Life is like a horseshoe. It's fat in the middle, open on both ends, and hard all the way through." While life can be hard, what determines the long-term well-being is not the absence of valleys, but how we respond to them. The Harvard study of adult development, the longest running study of human life, found that the quality of our relationships and our ability to adapt to life's challenges were far greater predictors of long-term health and happiness than wealth, fame, or even genetics. Today, our focus is threefold: resilience, which is our capacity to recover and adapt; positive coping, which involves strategies that move us forward instead of holding us back; and purpose, which is the anchor that helps us find meaning even when life feels uncertain. So what does it mean to thrive? Thriving is very different from simply surviving. Surviving means getting by, putting one foot in front of the other, sometimes just making it through the day. While thriving, however, is about growing, learning, and finding meaning even in difficult times. Psychologist Carol Reif created a model of psychological well-being that identifies 6 key dimensions of thriving: autonomy, environmental mastery, personal growth, positive relationships, purpose in life, and self-acceptance. People who score higher in these areas report greater life satisfaction and overall well-being. A powerful example is the research on post-traumatic growth. Studies show that many people who endure major challenges, serious illness, loss, or trauma, often report higher levels of purpose, stronger relationships, and an increased appreciation for life afterward. This demonstrates that thriving is not just about avoiding hardship, but about using it as a catalyst for personal growth. An example I personally experienced was when I was working at Mayo Clinic Hospital with cancer patients, and having more than one tell me that cancer changed their lives for the better because it made them reevaluate their priorities and focus on what was really important to them. So understanding what peaks and valleys are. Think of life like a landscape filled with peaks and valleys. The peaks represent our accomplishments, moments of joy, and times when things are going smoothly. The valleys represent our setbacks, stress, uncertainty, grief, or disappointment. Research in positive psychology by Barbara Fredrickson shows that positive emotions during peak moments broaden our awareness and help us build resources for the future. On the other hand, difficult experiences, what we're calling the valleys, deepen our resilience, self-awareness, and empathy. Without the valleys, we might never develop the depth of character that allows us to truly appreciate the peaks. A case study that's often cited is that of professional athletes. Many athletes describe their greatest personal growth not from winning championships, but from recovering from injuries. The setbacks force them to rethink their approach, rebuild their confidence, and develop mental toughness, skills that serve them both in sports and in life. So the science of resilience. Resilience is the ability to bounce back after adversity. But more importantly, it's not a fixed trait. We often think of some people as just being naturally resilient and others as not being that way. But neuroscience and psychology show that resilience is a skill that can be learned and strengthened. George Bonanno, a leading resilience researcher, studied trauma survivors, including bereaved individuals and 9/11 survivors. His findings show that resilience was far more common than chronic dysfunction. Most people, when given supportive environments and healthy coping tools, adapt over time. Neuroscience also teaches us that the brain is plastic. It can change and rewire throughout experiences. Practices like mindfulness and gratitude have been shown in the brain imaging studies to strengthen neurological pathways linked to emotional regulation and stress resilience. This means resilience is not about being born with a special strength. It's about training the mind and the body, just much like exercise does a muscle. So what are the factors that build resilience? There are 4 key factors that consistently show up in resilience research. It's optimism, emotional regulation, relationships, and purpose. So the first one, optimism. This doesn't mean ignoring problems. It's about believing challenges are temporary and manageable. Martin Seligman, founder of positive psychology, demonstrated through his work on learned optimism that people who reframe setbacks as temporary and specific rather than permanent and pervasive are more resilient and healthier. And this actually made me think of an article I recently read about a woman who was over 100, and when asked about her secret of life, she said that it was always to remember that this too shall pass. Reframing her life. Everything will pass in time. The second building factor here is emotional regulation. And this refers to managing stress without becoming overwhelmed. Research from Gross in 2002 shows that strategies like reframing thoughts and practicing mindfulness help people stay calm under pressure and recover more quickly. The third factor, supportive relationships. These are so essential. The Harvard Adult Development Study found that strong relationships were the #1 predictor of long-term happiness and health. We thrive better when we feel supported and connected. And fourth, and finally, purpose and meaning. In his 1946 classic work, A Man's Search for Meaning, Viktor Frankl recalls experience in concentration camps that showed people who held on to a sense of purpose survived better, even in dire conditions, thus highlighting how purpose sustains resilience, even in the most extreme valleys. So when challenges come, and they will, the way we cope can either build us up or break us down. Positive coping strategies are healthier, long-term ways of handling stress. Exercise is one of the most effective outlets. Physical activities reduce cortisol levels, improve mood, and builds resilience. A meta-analysis in health psychology found that even moderate physical activity significantly lowers stress and anxiety levels. Mindfulness practices like meditation or journaling allows us to process emotions instead of suppressing them. Studies at Harvard have shown that mindfulness can physically change our brain structures associated with stress regulation and empathy. Another positive coping strategy is reframing, cognitive reframing. This means shifting how we interpret a situation. For example, instead of thinking I failed, we can reframe it as I learned what doesn't work. This is essential to cognitive behavior therapy, one of the most effective therapies for building resilience. And finally, connection. Isolation can deepen valleys, while reaching out strengthens us. A case study of widowed individuals showed that those who leaned on social support groups adapted more positively than those who withdrew. And what else affects this is our mindset. Our mindset shapes how we experience both peaks and valleys. Carol Dweck's research on growth versus fixed mindset shows that people who believe abilities can be developed are more resilient, more likely to persist after failure, and more successful in the long run. A fixed mindset says, I failed, therefore I am not capable. A growth mindset says, I failed, therefore I can learn and improve. In studies of students, those with a growth mindset bounce back from academic setbacks much faster than those with a fixed mindset. The same applies to life's challenges. Thomas Edison famously said, I have not failed. I've just found 10,000 ways that won't work. That reframing mindset is what allowed him to persist through setbacks and eventually succeed. When we train ourselves to view valleys as temporary and full of lessons, we make them less threatening and more manageable.
Thank you, Renee. And now I'll be picking up on purpose. So purpose is like an anchor in the storm. Viktor Frankl taught us that those who had a why to live could endure almost any how. So purpose helps transform that suffering into meaning and makes those valleys more navigable. And modern research supports this. So a 2014 study found that having a strong sense of purpose was associated with lower mortality risk across the lifespan, regardless of age. In other words, people who feel that they're living for something bigger than themselves often live longer and healthier lives. And purpose can come from many places. It can come from your relationships with others. It can come from faith, from community service, from creativity, or from career. And it doesn't have to be grand. Even small value-driven actions can provide meaning. As Renee mentioned earlier, from anecdotal experience, there's also case studies of cancer survivors that show that many attribute their resilience not to eliminating stress, but to connecting deeply with a renewed sense of purpose, such as mentoring others or advocating for awareness. Success and fulfillment are not the same. So after we think about purpose and we think about doing things for purpose, we think about success and fulfillment. Success is often measured externally, right? Promotions, achievements, wealth, while fulfillment is more internal and is more grounded in living according to values and meaning. So some research from 2007 found that once basic needs are met, external achievements like wealth or status account for only a small percentage of happiness. And what matters more are daily practices like gratitude, acts of kindness, and pursuing meaningful goals. So for example, many high achieving professionals find themselves burnt out despite being successful. But when they begin aligning those daily activities with personal values, maybe like spending more time with family or contributing to causes that they care about, or even pursuing creative hobbies, those individuals report greater fulfillment and life satisfaction. This teaches us that fulfillment is not necessarily about achieving more, but about aligning more closely with who we are and what matters most to us. Now we're going to move from theory to practice. So we're going to be going over some powerful evidence-based tools that we can use for building resilience in everyday life. Firstly is a gratitude practice. So some research from 2003 found that participants who kept a gratitude journal reported higher levels of optimism, better sleep, and fewer health complaints compared to control groups. Secondly, breathing techniques. So simple practices like the 4-7-8 breath or box breathing help to activate the parasympathetic nervous system. And this is what calms our stress. Even Navy SEALs famously use box breathing to stay calm in high pressure situations. Another third tool that we can use is celebrating small wins. Some Harvard research found that recognizing those small daily progress or wins, it's one of the most powerful motivators in work and life. Acknowledging our progress, even those tiny steps, fuels momentum and resilience. Now, I encourage you to think about your own personal thriving toolkit. So this is a set of tools, people, and practices that you can rely on during the valleys. To build your personal toolkit, you can start by identifying coping strategies that work for you. So whether it's journaling, running, meditating, listening to music, whatever you know works for you. Research shows that different strategies work for different people, but what matters the most is consistency. So finding what works for you and continually doing it. Next, map your support system. So as we talked about, social support, relationships, it's one of the most consistent predictors of resilience across different studies. Knowing who you can lean on, whether it's friends, family, mentors, it can really help make those valleys less overwhelming because you don't have to go through it alone. And then finally, creating those self-care rituals. So these can be small daily actions that recharge you, like maybe a morning walk, weekly meal prep, or taking some time off your phone, digital detox. Case studies of caregivers show that those who maintain self-care rituals experience lower burnout and higher well-being, even while supporting others. Of course, this is all well and good, right? But there are barriers that prevent us from thriving. Negative self-talk is one of the biggest. So cognitive behavioral research shows that our thoughts shape our emotions and behaviors. So what we think in our brains shapes our reality. And when we shift, I can't do this to maybe I can't do this yet, or I'm working on being able to do this, right? We open that space for growth. So kind of coming back to that growth mindset, shaping how we talk to ourselves can help shape our reality. Another common barrier is burnout. Even the World Health Organization recognizes burnout as an occupational phenomenon that is characterized by exhaustion, cynicism, and reduced performance. Burnout is often caused by chronic stress without recovery. What's the antidote to this? Boundaries, rest, and balance. Now, another barrier is comparison to others. And this is, of course, amplified by social media. Studies link high social media use with lower self-esteem and higher depression. And this is largely due to comparison. And just remember, with social media, we're comparing our behind the scenes to someone else's highlight reel, right? It's not an equal comparison. The key to overcoming all of these barriers, firstly, is awareness, just being aware of it and reframing. So catching the negative thought, catching the burnout, catching the comparison, pausing, and choosing a healthier interpretation. And this is why it's so important to come back to your toolkit that you created. Of course, we talked a little bit about burnout. Resilience is not only personal, it's professional. Workplaces are often full of stressors, from deadlines to organizational changes, but resilient employees adapt better and foster healthier cultures. Research from the American Institute of Stress found that workplace stress is one of the leading causes of burnout. So organizations that encourage resilience training, mindfulness, and flexible work arrangements see improved employee well-being and productivity. Balance and boundaries are critical. So knowing when to log off, when to take breaks, when to prioritize rest. In case studies, companies with wellness initiatives that focus on work-life balance are also linked to higher employee engagement and retention. And finally, fostering those supportive workplace cultures where colleagues encourage one another, acknowledge struggles, celebrate wins, it helps create collective resilience. Because thriving isn't just an individual endeavor, it's something that we can build together. Now, before we close, I want to invite you to reflect, to think about one valley that you've experienced in your life, maybe a setback, a loss, a difficult period, and ask yourself, how did I grow from it? How did that valley shape me? What strengths did I develop that I carry today? After reflecting on that, we want to shift from reflection to action. So what is one strategy that you'll commit to practicing starting today? Maybe it's beginning a gratitude journal and writing down 3 things that you're grateful for today. Maybe it's practicing a new breathing technique or reaching out to a friend. Studies show that setting even a small specific action increases the likelihood of follow through. So write it down, share it with someone, or put it on your calendar, because thriving, it's not about those grand gestures. It's about small, consistent actions. And as we wrap up, I just want to revisit some of the key takeaways. Thriving means building resilience, practicing positive coping, and finding fulfillment through purpose. Valleys will always come, but they can shape us just as much as the peaks. And for those who'd like to explore further, I've listed a few excellent resources. So Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning is a powerful read on purpose. Susan David's Emotional Agility explores resilience and flexibility. And Sean Aker's The Happiness Advantage dives into the science of positivity. If you are more into podcasts, there are 2 options, The Happiness Lab and The Science of Happiness. Both offer accessible, research-based strategies for everyday thriving. So thank you so much for your time and attention today. If you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the Q&A or in the chat, and we'll stick around to answer them. But before you leave, I do want to mention our next webinar on September 24th, again, from noon to 12:30 Eastern time. And that is going to be on emergency preparedness. So we'll be talking about how we can ensure our safety and our family safety, particularly in unpredictable situations. So if you'd like to register for that, scan the QR code or visit the Strive library. But thank you for your time today. And as promised, we'll stick around for just a few minutes to answer any questions.